Okay, so let's get this started. Welcome along to the GDC podcast. We're going to call it that, the Gentleman Drivers Community Club, whatever you want to call it. I am Richie, also known as We Are Racing on your screen. We've got the one, the only. Which way are you? You're here.
Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm the twat Richie's going to be talking bollocks with for the next however long we manage to go on for. How you doing, Rich? How you been today?
I'm very good, and welcome to the Talking Twats podcast here. But I'm very well, thank you, sir. So we thought we'd be catching up a bit more of a community-based thing, and if you fancy getting involved with us, let us know. We'll be talking utter bollocks all the time, and we'll be talking about all things racing and all things probably not racing as well. But so just to introduce myself, I'm a big racing fan. I like to go to GT racing recently, but big F1 nut, and particularly the iconic Lewis Hamilton. So call me a ham fanboy to your heart's content, because that's what it says on the tin. How about you, Matt?
I thought to balance you out, Rich, because you're a massive Hamilton fan. I'm like the exact opposite. I'm not a massive Hamilton fan. More of a Ferrari fan myself. I won't wear the hat because it's all bright red and that's a bit much. But yeah, I like an underdog as well. I like the one that's not expected to win. So I am going to be shouting about Verstappen a lot more than Hamilton through this, Rich. And I know you're going to love that.
With a pinch of salt, we'll take that with, yes. But maybe we won't. But so the 7-time champ, surely not expected to win this season, Matt. No? Coming into this season, I mean, all things aligned to the number 8, surely.
Well, you think so, wouldn't you? I mean, you come off of last year. They've hardly changed any regulations. It's basically the same cast. You would have thought it's a slam dunk Mercedes championship, Hamilton champion again. But we've been nicely surprised.
Yeah, nicely surprised. And it's like an evolution of the car. So a lot of the teams haven't like renamed their car as such. It's just a newer edition of last year's. And the only adjustments we've seen is around the rear bottleneck of the coke area, they call it on the TV, etc. They've taken some of the downforce away from that and made it a bit more simple. And it seems to have favoured Red Bull this year, the kind of higher rake concepts, because Mercedes have seemed to struggle to like finely tune their car, Matt. And also the other standout would be the newly branded Aston Martin for this season. What do you take on the performance of both them teams on the early part of the season?
Yeah, for sure. It was a big shock for both teams. You obviously got Mercedes, who won last year's championship by a long shot, Racing Point as they were last year. They were fourth in the end, weren't they? Only just. So for those two teams to rock up and Mercedes not be the fastest car straight away and Aston Martin be arguably the 6th or 7th quickest car, it was a big shock. And like you say, it's definitely a regulation change that favoured those low rake car concepts. So the Red Bull, your AlphaTauri, they benefited massively from this very small change.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of teams will be looking with one eye or two eyes even towards next year. The likes of Haas, they've put absolutely zero budget into this year's competitor, and they're going to put all their eggs in next season's cars, which we'll get into a bit later. But that's our allegiance is. As you can already tell, I'm a passionate Hamilton fan, and Matt is not. But the season so far. So just having a look through the results for the season itself, Matt. We kicked off the season in Bahrain, and that was one hell of a race, wasn't it? Because that one went all the way to them final laps there. And what was the key battleground for you in that race, off the top of your head? Because you're like an encyclopedia of knowledge. Let's just get that out there. This guy, he remembers facts, stats, and everything there is to know.
Yeah, I'm going to forget them all now you said that, Rich. That's like our commentator's curse coming up there.
Yeah.
From what I know from Bahrain, it was looking like all through testing we had at Bahrain, Red Bull was the quickest car, and all through the build-up of the weekend, through practice, through qualifying, Red Bull and Verstappen looked on top. They looked untouchable. But we turned up to the race, and Hamilton and Mercedes, they were there. They weren't falling away at all. And I think that was, on that season opener, I think Red Bull, they got the strategy wrong. They let Mercedes do the undercut, get ahead early on, and that was it. Verstappen had one chance to try and get back ahead, and he bottled it, didn't he, end of the day?
Yeah, he went off circuit, overtook off circuit, and was it ordered to give the position back? And he couldn't do it again. He couldn't mount the charge, get the tyres back in the right window. As we know, these cars are ever so sensitive. So, yeah, round one, it was advantage to Mercedes. And you never know what it's going to be like until we go through the checkered flag for the first time. And it was once again Mercedes that led the charge, which was, you know, a bit of a surprise. But Mercedes always like to get the sandbags out, don't they, Matt?
Yeah, for sure. I remember after qualifying thinking, yeah, it's still not right, Mercedes being half a second off pace. They got something up their sleeve still, and indeed they did.
Yeah, so we'll just skim through this. Of course, the championship has been a bit different to what was first published this year. Of course, all things COVID related meant that we couldn't go to the likes of China and a few other circuits. So in steps, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, also known as the beloved Imola. And it was great to be back there once again, Matt. And it's thrown up some great racing since we've been there.
Absolutely. It's one of my favourite circuits. Like, just to drive on what we got on the F1 games now, it's great. But on ACC as well, it is a fabulous circuit. And it was great to see Formula One cars back at the venue. A wet race. We love a good bit of rain. Although actually we might have had a bit too much rain this season. But yeah, it was another thrilling race, was it? And it was the first time we properly saw Hamilton and Verstappen get the elbows out on that run to turn one, didn't we?
Yeah, we saw it on the run down to turn one. It happened immediately down at the first corner. There was contact. I have to say, Max squeezed Lewis out off the circuit, and I'll be saying a lot of that today. Bumped wheels, but again, you know, you have to give like some sort of like what's the right words? You know, benefit of the doubt. Of course, they're in wet conditions going down towards turn one. You want to brake as late as possible. Max, if he sees Lewis braking a bit later, he's going to try and brake that bit later than him. And it's kind of one of those things. But there was contact. Lewis lived to fight another day. Was in a fairly good position, Lewis, and then disaster struck.
Yeah, all through his own doing.
Sorry, we froze a bit there, Matt. I don't know if we caught it. But yeah, disaster struck. And then Lewis went off circuits, ended up driving towards the barrier, which wasn't advisable. Had to reverse back onto the circuit, lost a lot of time, but did manage a great fight back in that race and just showed the Lewis spirit. And yeah, it was advantage to Mr. Max Verstappen, who claimed his first victory of the season. So it's 1-1 going into round 3, which took us to Portimao. You're a fan of Portimao, Matt, as a circuit for racing with these F1 cars? Because it's quite a difficult circuit, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. There's a lot of elevation change. But what the circuit does have to its advantage for racing, it's very wide. Like, there's so much space on that circuit. You could probably get cars like 5-6 wide there if you wanted to. So there's plenty of room for racing, which was good.
Yeah, the first visit that we saw there, we just saw cars overtaking left, right, centre. A certain Kimi Räikkönen really rolling back the years with the soft tyres on the first time around with the damp and really cold conditions. So that's something else that we've seen this year, Matt, is we've seen some unseasonal events which have led to some great racing as well. And I think we should do a bit more of that. Maybe put, you know, Silverstone in November, see how they go around the British track there. But
just rain you're asking for there, Rich, but in Britain in November. Rain.
So then we headed to Spain, and yeah, so Lewis obviously won in Portugal, and it was quite a solid performance from the Mercedes package around Portugal. Done a very good job around there. Then into Spain, the Circuit de Catalunya, and another Mercedes stronghold once again. A good battle between the pair of them, but yeah, Lewis come out on top. We moved into Monaco, and this is where it really started to slide away for Mercedes in this one. Max Verstappen taking the victory, and Mercedes, you know, once again struggling around the tight and twisty Monaco streets. What did you make of that? It's a long way ago, it feels now, Matt.
It was a while ago, wasn't it? But we were in Monaco, and we did have a pretty dull race, you'd have to say. We had like one overtake all race, and of course they missed it because we were watching a replay of Lance Stroll being Lance Stroll. But yeah, it was a poor weekend for Mercedes, I think, on all fronts. It wasn't just they were slow and off the pace. It was a bad strategy as well, because you have to remember had they had a straightforward race finished in the order they started, Hamilton should have finished P5, but he ended up behind Perez and Vettel as well, who both, I think they overcut him, of all things.
Yeah, well, they didn't have the pace in clean air, so I don't know why they've done it. You know what it's like around Monaco; it's impossible to overtake. So get the fresh tyres on, try and get some pace towards you. But there's some really strange decision making from Mercedes, who are normally immaculate in that department. But Red Bull seem to have had the upper hand in a few races this year. Then, of course, we went to Azerbaijan. Max Verstappen out front. The big failure down that long straight there, and disaster. And Lewis must have been licking his lips there. You know, we had a restart. We had a sprint race of all sprint races at the end of that one, Matt. And how did it finish? Just remind me, because I'm tingling just thinking about that one.
Oh, Rich, there was a little bit of a bottle job at turn 1, I seem to remember. Someone driving... Oh, it was Lewis Hamilton. Oh,
Never.
He drove off the road at turn 1, didn't he? Forgot where the corner went. What a muppet. Yeah, that was Lewis's big opportunity, because he got the better start than Perez. He was going to be leading to turn 1. That would have been job done. 25 points on Verstappen. But he threw it all away.
He threw it all away, and it was magic for Verstappen, but Lewis had the magic brakes turned on, and which meant the whole bias was on the front axle of the car. He couldn't slow it down in time, went straight on, locked up. I can't even remember where he finished then. He was well off out the points, wasn't he? But we saw Sergio Perez rise to claim victory at Azerbaijan. And that was a special moment, you know, after the end of last season as well, you know, not having a drive confirmed, you know, not knowing what was going to happen. No one thought it was possible that he would go to Red Bull, because, you know, they've always kept their drivers in-house, tried to promote from within. But Sergio Perez really came to the fore, and that was special. What did you make of it, Matt?
Yeah, he said he needed 5 races to get used to the car. And what did he do in his 6th race? He went and won the race. Good stuff from Perez. He was there to pick up the pieces. That was the key thing, because where was Bottas in Baku? Nowhere to be seen. He was out. He lost places to Raikkonen, Alonso. He was well out of it. But Perez, he got his head down. He got the job done. And that's a big confidence boost for him as well, because he managed to do what Albon and Gasly couldn't, win as Max Verstappen's teammate.
Yeah, and that's what you need in this competition, is here a cutthroat when you've got two teams going at it, constructors and drivers. And, you know, Perez, you know, was there. He challenged Lewis down into turn 1. Lewis bottled it, in your words. And, yeah, he claimed the maximum points there. And that's what you need to take points off the other driver, even though he didn't, you know, get in there at that point. But, yeah, great to see a certain Sergio Perez right up there at the sharp end. And then it was a hat trick of victories. We had France, Styrian, and the Austrian, where it was pretty much domination, I would have to say, for that Red Bull package. Why were they so strong there, do you reckon? And why were Mercedes so off the pace?
Yeah, I'm not a man who understands why the cars are fast at which circuits, Rich. But yeah, in Austria particularly, Mercedes were just miles off the pace compared to Max Verstappen and Red Bull. I think, to be fair, Austria, even in years gone by, we've always seen that that's not necessarily been Mercedes' strongest track. I mean, you know, we saw Red Bull win there in 2018 and 2019, both Max Verstappen. And we knew that there was potential for Red Bull to run away with it, and they did, comfortably.
Yeah, comfortably. And like France has always been quite a strong track for Mercedes as well. So it was a bit of a telling sign that they wasn't really on top of the package. And, you know, maybe they thought it was going to be a bit easier than it was this season. But, yeah, really slipping away from Mercedes at that point in the season. And then we headed to Silverstone, Matt. Our first sprint race format of the year. Of course, we had a 3-lap sprint in Azerbaijan, but that wasn't scheduled. But this time we had Friday night qualifying, which was it was a special atmosphere as well, having a Friday night qualifying. A bit of a carnival atmosphere that weekend, the first time since lockdown that we got a full capacity crowd. We had 140,000 for race day, and it was spine-tingling stuff. Lewis Hamilton pulling it out. But then we headed into the sprint qualifying, and it was business as usual for Red Bull, Matt.
Yeah, it was a... Well, Hamilton just got a bad start, I think. Red Bull and Verstappen pulled away off the line. They had a great battle on that opening lap, perhaps previewing some of the events of tomorrow. We'll get on to them in a few moments' time. But yeah, after the end of the first lap, Verstappen just looked to control his lead, and took pole position and 3 points away. I think that gave him like a championship lead of 32 points. So Lewis now knows he can't afford to lose more points to Verstappen in the Grand Prix. And you were sat there, Rich. You were at the Grand Prix. Why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, it was at that point in the season that Lewis Hamilton, he knew that he couldn't just take all of these punches on the chin from Max Verstappen. You know, he really had to get his elbows out, like you say, and stake a claim, because this guy wasn't giving any inches, and Max wasn't pulling any punches. So going down into Stowe on the Saturday, Lewis Hamilton tried to go around the outside, and Max Verstappen claimed the corner, didn't give him any space. Lewis struggled from there, and Max was just a figure in the distance for the rest of that sprint race. Then heading into the Sunday, yes, Lewis had it all to do. He knew his ideal opportunity was on that lap one, and if Max got away from him, that would be it. So coming back down into Stowe, down the national pit straight, Max Verstappen feinted to the inside, tried to hold the middle ground of the road and do the same that he done on Saturday, but Lewis done a kind of double dummy, dived up the inside, late on the brakes, and contact. And what was the G-force in that one? 52 Gs or something incredible there, Matt. Big off into the barrier. As a Hamilton fan, initially I was ecstatic. Then I was very concerned for the welfare of Max, because it was, you saw the car when it came out the barrier, it was a testament to the safety of these cars at this stage in the sport. And Lewis Hamilton was given a penalty. Was it a 10-second penalty, Matt?
10 seconds indeed.
Yeah, 10 seconds. Then had it all to do. Charles Leclerc, of course, was leading after that early incident, was out front, and heartbreak for the Ferrari driver, because he drove an impeccable race, you know, in a car which shouldn't be performing at the front of the grid. Again, Valtteri Bottas, what were you doing? Where were you? You know, there's where's Wally and there's where's Valtteri. They should make a Christmas edition for him, because he has been missing for large parts of the season. But yeah, and it was just, Lewis Hamilton was just giving absolutely everything, and got the victory in the final laps, managed to get past Charles Leclerc going down into Stowe. He was a bit more, shall we say, careful. He knew he had big points on the table for the team, and that just shows the class of the driver as well. Leclerc, he plays the percentages, but it was Lewis Hamilton on home turf, and Max wasn't too happy with the celebrations.
No, and I can understand why. He was in hospital after the big crash. He obviously felt that Hamilton had taken him out of the race, and so I can see why he perhaps wasn't happy to see Lewis celebrating. But end of the day, it was Lewis who was there on the day. He got the job done, and it wasn't easy that day to win. He still had to pass Charles Leclerc for Ferrari. We haven't spoken about them too much, but they've made massive jumps this season. I mean, they've got 2 poles in Monaco and Baku, and an almost win at Silverstone. They've come a long way.
Yeah, that car was really hit and miss in the early phases, coming up to the halfway point we're talking about now. And earlier on, it was either nowhere or it looked really sharp, you know, really drivable. Of course, they've had a power deficit from the previous seasons when they was found out to be doing things that they shouldn't be doing, had a slap on the wrist. We had a new technical directive, which we still never got to the bottom of, really, did we, after Austin that time, where they really wound back the engine. It seemed to be a fuel flow irregularity on that car. They had some gimmicks to get around it. But, yeah, some big strides. And having the pole position, of course, for Mr. Charles Leclerc in the Monegasque, taking it at Monaco. And then we didn't really talk about that, but he got it taken away from him, didn't he? Because he had to have a penalty. Was it the gearbox?
In Monaco, it was... No, he just didn't start, did he? He was on pole, but he didn't start the race.
Oh, yeah, good.
His car was broken.
Yeah, and it was kind of like a double-edged sword almost for Ferrari, because Charles Leclerc did damage the car in qualifying. They chose not to replace the component, that's it. And because of that accident, Carlos Sainz didn't manage to set a lap time either. So it sort of, yeah, it didn't work out at all. But Ferrari, difficult early phase to this season. But after Silverstone, we headed to Budapest. Budapest, always a boring race, Matt. Always a boring one. Nothing to talk about there.
Nothing ever happens at Budapest, mate. They can't overtake. That was the story of Hamilton versus Alonso. But let's bring it back to the start of the Hungarian Grand Prix. It was a
Valtteri.
And Valtteri, ultimate Mercedes wingman, took out both Red Bulls and Norris, the closest 3 drivers to Hamilton, in one smooth operation move.
And you saw he got a brand new car from Mercedes shortly after that, didn't he? A few races after. Maybe that was like a bonus. Who knows? That was in the contract. But early drama, Lance Stroll as well, taking out a few people, getting it all wrong on the braking, going down into turn one. And of course, even before the start, Matt, we had high drama. Everyone was on intermediate tyres, and everyone, did everyone come into the box?
Negative, Richie. One driver decided he wanted to stay out because he thought that it was still time for him to. That would be Mr. Lewis Hamilton. It proved to be a mistake for him, didn't it? Had he boxed for the slick tyres, he would have led from the start, easy win. But instead, he had it all to do, had to come from the back after being the only one who had to pit at the end of that first proper racing lap we had because he was on the wrong tyre.
Yeah, that was an instant meme. Lewis Hamilton sitting there with the 5 red lights. Lights out and Lewis is away. No one else. Everyone was in the box waiting at the end of the pit lane. And Mercedes, of course, they have the first box, don't they, in the garage. So they was worried that if they come in, they have to let everyone past anyway. But in the grand scheme of things, it's easy in hindsight. They would have lost out less because he was well off the back of the pack, but it was some comeback drive once again. But Mercedes dropped the ball on that one. You know, it's them heat of the moment decisions, which are really not worked out too well this year, and potentially lost out on another race victory, Matt.
Yeah, for sure. It's another 7 points in the bin, perhaps. Mercedes, effectively, after the crash happened, they had no competitors because Perez out of the race, Bottas out of the race, Verstappen, he's in the race, but he is missing half of his car. He's got a car that's probably about as good as a Haas right now. So it should have been an easy win for Hamilton. And in the end, he did prove his class and the speed of his Mercedes because he did come charging through the field. A late pit stop, doing perhaps what they did in Spain, giving him fresh tyres to cut through the field. And it was a plan that all would have worked if it wasn't for his old friend, Fernando.
McLaren friends. I don't think they've ever been too close, but Fernando's never too complimentary when they talk about Lewis Hamilton and being so successful. He said it's all down to the car. He's all right driver, but he's not that great. That's why me and Alonso don't get along too well. But you've got to respect the man. He drove him as hard and as fair, and that's what the kind of driving that Max Verstappen hopefully develops into, you know, when you can just use every inch of the circuit and defend as beautifully as Fernando Alonso. As a Hamilton fan, it was hella frustrating because you could just see the pace and, you know, the tyres were getting cooked. That, you know, just the performance in them was sliding off. But that left, you know, Ocon, his teammate, up there at the sharp end along with Sebastian Vettel, who we expected to really close in and, you know, battle for the lead in them final laps. But surely another car must have won it. Who was it, Mercedes or Red Bull in that race, Matt?
Oh, it was no, it was an Alpine. It was Esteban Ocon won the Hungarian Grand Prix. Absolute scenes. You'd love to see it. And Aston Martin in P2 on the road with Sebastian Vettel. Another great drive for the 4-time world champion. Perhaps on another day, a different circuit, Vettel could have got the move down to 1. He said he had the pace, but ultimately could not find a way past Ocon. But I seem to remember things unravelling a bit for Aston Martin after the race. What was it? A fuel something or other?
Yeah, it was a lack of fuel sample within the car. They tried to appeal it, of course, to the hills. They impounded the car itself for quite a long time, actually. And apparently there was they claimed it evaporated. It just disappeared, basically. And there was not enough fuel there. But, yeah, they really missed the boat on that one. It was poor management, I'd say, by the Aston Martin team. They could have pulled the car over earlier in the lap, which we've seen cars do if it needs to happen. But you know, driving a bit too hard, should have maybe lifted and coasted a bit more towards the end, which we hate them having to do, but it's part of the game, unfortunately. But beautiful to see another first-time winner in the series of F1, and you know, it was great scenes after that one. The embrace between Alonso and Ocon, and yeah, great for the sport, Matt.
Yeah, it's always good to see those underdog teams winning. It's something we've not really seen at all in the turbo hybrid era. We've had, I think the stat was, until Gasly won last year, the last time a driver won that wasn't driving for Red Bull, Ferrari or Mercedes was Raikkonen, all the way back for Lotus in 2013. So it's been great these last couple of years to see those those midfield teams taking those opportunities when they come and bringing home a race win here and there.
Yeah, of course, Pierre Gasly recently as well. Great to see him, first time winner up there. And yeah, a bit that car, it promised a lot, the AlphaTauri, but we'll get into it a bit later. It really hasn't performed as it should have. But we headed back to business as usual. We went back to Belgium, Spa-Francorchamps. Always a fantastic race in Belgium, eh, Matt? And this one was, like every other year, a great spectacle for the fans.
Oh, yeah, it was a thrilling race in Belgium. A thrilling Saturday. We will give it that. That wet qualifying session threw up all sorts of surprises. And, well, for the longest time, it looked like Lando Norris was going to be the young Brit to put his McLaren on pole. He was lightning quick all through Q1, all through Q2. We got into Q3. It was raining a bit more. They were calling for red flags. They didn't come out. And unfortunately, Lando Norris came a cropper at Eau Rouge / Radion.
Yeah, big shunt up the hill. And what else did we see? We saw a certain George Russell. Was it on the front row for him, putting it, what was it, yeah, P2 or something crazy? And just, you know, a fantasy. And we're just like eagerly awaiting that race because that opening lap is going to be pure carnage, pure Send It City. But we waited, and we waited, Matt.
And we are still waiting for the start of the Belgian Grand Prix because it's still not yet happened. We had like 3 laps under safety car before they decided, nope, not happening. And that was it. That was the Belgian Grand Prix done and dusted. Half points awarded for where they were in qualifying, which is not really what you want to see at all, really, is it? Because there's no points for qualifying any other venue, so why should there be at Belgium, really?
Yeah, I feel that was a bit of a robbery in terms of dishing out points and for calling it a race as well. And of course, it all comes down to a dollar bill. And, you know, that meant that the race was officially signed off. No one needed it to be refunded, whether it was vendors or suppliers, fans, teams, you name it. But they called it a race, the race that never was, shall we call that one. And a real disappointment for everyone who spent their hard-earned money, sat there in hours of the pouring rain. Look, going forward, surely there can be something else that can be done to like mitigate that. They say they can't race on a Monday, but I don't know what can be done. But anyway, we moved on, and we've been waiting eagerly to go to Zandvoort. We finally got there this season. How was that one, Matt? Bit of a boring race. The fans, you know, they didn't really turn up. There wasn't too many fans there, was there?
I'm going to have to strongly disagree with you there, Richard. We had the Orange Army is pretty good everywhere we go, isn't it? You often get a nice big chunk of Max Verstappen fans. You go to Zandvoort, and every single person there is a Max Verstappen fan. I think I remember there was like a photo of this sea of orange, and there was just this one little Ferrari fan in the middle, and he looked quite lonely in there.
Now, you wouldn't fancy going there as a Mercedes fan because you'd absolutely get your legs broken, your kneecaps taken off, and I doubt you'd make it out of there alive, especially if Lewis did manage to pull something out the back. But, you know, really suited to the Red Bull package. They was really strong around there, and it was a great homecoming and a beautiful spectacle to see Max Verstappen. You know, we know how special it is, especially for me, Lewis Hamilton, you know, when he pulls them results out at Silverstone. So I can only imagine in the spine-tingling nature, especially that party atmosphere. They had DJs on every corner of the circuit, pumping out the tunes, really motivating the crowd, and the orange smoke and flares firing. But another dominant display for Max Verstappen in that one. Not the most entertaining race, Matt. Difficult to overtake around there. And I'm not sure how keen you are to have that as a circuit going forward. What do you think?
I think it's a cool circuit. Some of the corners there are really unique. You've got the massive banking of turns, 4, and then the last corner. They're really cool corners. It is an interesting circuit. It's definitely unique. The only downside of it is being, like you said, it's really challenging to overtake. The only opportunity you've properly got is you've got turn 1, and the main straight, maybe not quite long enough.
Yeah, but these spec of cars anyway, it's very hard to follow to get close enough when you do approach them corners where you can take an alternate line. We saw it on the opening lap right down towards turn 4. We saw 2 to 3 cars wide going through there, and it was, that's what we want to see. But after that, single file, and then you get that delta where everyone needs to sit like a second and a half behind each other. Otherwise, you're just cooking up the car. You're not getting the right downforce, and it's just the beasts that they are. These current cars, so aero dependent, but. We headed to a classic circuit, one that we always love, and you love, Monza, Matt.
Oh, yeah, me and Silent Boom go way back at Monza. We're not going to talk about the PTSD I have of Monza, but strikes a nerve going back every time. Yes,
and you expected another easy Mercedes, I would have said, going into there. Or potentially Red Bull, they look pretty good in a straight line this season. They kind of had a power advantage. Honda really threw the book. Of course, Honda bowing out at the end of the year. Really wanted a strong swan song there to curtail their Formula One adventure. And they looked to have overtaken Mercedes on the power front. And it was a titanic battle going into this one. Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen. And of course, which one of them won? Again, remind me, Matt.
Oh, the Italian Grand Prix, was it? Oh, no, it was a McLaren. McLaren, 1-2. Where did Verstappen and Hamilton finish?
I think they got a room, didn't they? I think Max mounted Lewis. I mean, they've been so close all year. Things have been really spicing up, and then they took it to another level by getting on top of one another. But... dramatic scenes there. Coming out of the pits, was it Lewis coming out of the pits when it down towards turn 1 and coming out ahead? Max Verstappen at a full tilt, tried to go around the outside of 1 inside to 2. There wasn't space for it to happen, and disaster struck, and Lewis had the Red Bull sitting on his head, which is quite concerning as well.
Like, properly got whacked in the back of the head, didn't he? And another testament to the safety of their helmets more than anything, I guess, because that was you don't want to have a Formula One car sat on your head, Rich. That's some good life advice for you. Write that one down. Don't have a Formula One car on your head. But it was almost fate that they came together on that day, because I remember Verstappen had a slow pit stop, and that's why Hamilton came in, because they knew that they can pit him now and he'll come out ahead of Max, because Max was like 10 seconds in the box. Lewis comes in, and guess who else has a slow pit stop? Mercedes. On the day they needed to get it right, got it just that bit wrong. Not quite as bad as Max's pit stop, but still slow enough that they not only allowed Norris through, but they allowed Verstappen to be close enough that, Max, he's not gonna give up the opportunity, is he? He went for it, sent one to the outside, and then all went down from there.
Yeah, hop, skip, and a jump across them big sausages, and launched himself, and the tyres went face to face, and that projected the car up there. I think the halo played its part as well, Matt, because I think that took some of the weight off Lewis's shoulders, quite literally. And he probably got pushed down a bit within the car. I complained of some neck pain, but he was in New York a few days later at the Met Gala, I think it was. So he wasn't too badly injured. He moved on, but it just intensified the season that bit more, that contact, and the war of words between Toto and Christian this year has been something. It's like two dads on the side of the football pitch having a go at each other on them opposing teams, and it's beautiful to see. But that was the Italian Grand Prix. Daniel Ricciardo, P1. Lando Norris would have normally been happy with P2, but he had to play second fiddle to his teammate, who had a really tough start to the year. It was all Lando Norris, and then Daniel Ricciardo comes and pulls that one out the bag.
Yeah, it was Daniel there on the day who got it done. And you have to remember on that day, it wasn't just McLaren won because Verstappen and Hamilton crashed into each other. Ricciardo took the lead off Max on the run to turn 1 and was leading the race up until that point. He was controlling it quite well. And there's every chance that even had Hamilton and Verstappen not come together, you still could have had a McLaren 1-2 that day.
Yeah, the pace of the McLaren package with the low downforce on it was really planted, really stable, and really goddamn fast. And with the Merc power unit now in the back of it as well, which they had to try and fit into the concept, but it's gone to it like a duck to water. And really strong half of the year for McLaren, and capped off with that impressive victory at Monza, where you probably wouldn't have expected it if you had a pick of any of the circuits on the calendar. But then we headed to Russia after that, to Sochi. Always a boring race once again, Matt. You never get any good racing around Sochi. We've been calling for it to be scrapped for years upon years. And this one, was pretty similar, wasn't it? Pretty dull affair.
Not quite, Rich, because I don't know how it happened. We've had, 7 really dull, boring, terrible races at Sochi. I think we've just been building up karma or something, because we came there this year and it was just all kicking off through qualifying and into the race. It was brilliant.
You don't know where to start with that one. Let's just talk Fernando Alonso, IQ level 1,000 going down into turn 1. He heard that he just has to go around the bollard, so he didn't even try and make the corner to start with. Just went flying off, and it was legal. He made the position, and he made the FI look pretty stupid with that one. But again, the McLaren package looking strong on merit, going up against Mercedes, and a real thorn in Mercedes' title charge as well, because it was just another team to contend with. And Lewis Hamilton, he was stuck behind him until
it started to rain. The Russian Grand Prix was really good for those first sort of 47, 40, whatever it was, laps. But completely ignore it. It's irrelevant, because then it rained and that changed literally everything. It was all about who pitted at the right time, because the rain, it started and it was it'll probably be all right. You can just stay on slicks till the end. And then it got to, it's a bit heavier now, but it's still, you'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, the heavens opened and the circuit in that middle sector, it was just undrivable. You could not get through there on slick tyres, not a chance.
Yeah, we've all been there, Matt, in online races. When you're in the lead, you don't want to surrender it. You don't want to be the first one to jump into the pits. If you get it wrong, you're going to throw away the lead, literally. So you want to let someone else roll the dice at that point. And remember, Max Verstappen started at the back of the grid. He took his penalties there. And it just all came together for him. At one point, I was looking at it as a Lewis fan. I was like, this is the perfect result. Even P2 here. Max is well out of the points. This is all we need. Just stay as it is. But it was all flipped on its head. Max Verstappen chose a beautiful time to come into the pits. Lewis stayed out quite late. Norris, to his fate, stayed out way too long. And we saw those distressing images. We was all a Norris fan in that race. I think it's fair to say. And just seeing him slide off the track, he couldn't do nothing to hold the car in a straight line. And Lewis called it right, won the race. Yet again, another Mercedes dominant display at Sochi.
Yeah, unfortunately it was. He won by such a big gap to Verstappen as well. If you hadn't watched the race, you'd just seen the result, you'd have gone, oh, for God's sake, Hamilton run away with it again, hadn't it? Wasn't the case. It just the way it all panned out, it ended up being a Hamilton winning by about 50 seconds or something. But still a good recovery from Max. To only lose 7 points to Lewis in a race where he started dead last, it's pretty good going.
And can you imagine Lewis's reaction? He must have got out of the car and be like, how the how did you get there? But, another race, another masterclass for Red Bull as well. They pulled that right out the bag, and that was massive damage limitation after taking that massive penalty, and getting the new power unit, etc. But then we headed to Turkey. Turkey, we was treated to a fantastic race when we had the newly asphalted circuit still being greasy and seeping out. We've had no racing there as well in between the two races, because I don't know why, but no one wants to go racing there. And looked like it would be a pretty dull affair once again, Matt. But talk us through the Turkish Grand Prix.
Always benefited with a little bit of precipitation. Who took grid penalties? Did Hamilton take penalties in Turkey? I'm sure someone did.
It's a bit of a blur. I think so.
I think Hamilton took penalties, and that's why Bottas was just... Because Bottas doesn't win races when Hamilton's there. We've seen that many a times. But it was definitely a Mercedes circuit. We saw that absolutely, because that in I don't want to say a wet race because it wasn't raining for most of it. It was just a slightly damp track, and they just sort of turned their inters into slicks and went with those. A bit a weird one for the conditions, but gave us something unique to watch. And then, yeah, for Bottas to have complete control over Verstappen, it's a pretty good sign that it's a very Mercedes circuit. So you'd expect Hamilton to come through the field and finish on the podium, would you not?
Yeah, surely. But yeah, they got it all wrong. Of course, taking the penalty in that race hindered him somewhat, but he tried to go for a strong overcut and didn't want to put the fresh tyres on because he'd have to go through that graining phase, get him back to slick again. And he was like eyeing up, like a lot of the teams were trying to go just for the straight crossover to the slick tyre. But because it was so cold in Turkey, they couldn't get no temperature into the tyre. The Inters were the ideal option because you still got some moving around. You had to go through that pain stage. And Sergio Perez, he made it right. We saw a titanic battle between Lewis and once again, proving his worth, Sergio Perez, really putting Hamilton right on the edge, of his seat, literally, and the circuit. I thought there was going to be a crash there, but, he's been fantastic and crucial to Max Verstappen's charge in this championship as well. Because if it would have been a cut and dry, Lewis got past there and flew off to the distance, it might have been a different strategy call at that point as well. And, Lewis could have got a few more points in the bag, but it wasn't to be. Valtteri did limit the damage there, got some good constructors' points, proved his worth, his only victory of the season, and he's been faded away. He needed that big time, didn't he, Matt? And a big result for the Finn.
Yeah, for Bottas this season, it really all sort of begun for Valtteri at Monza. The race after, of course, he was announced to be leaving Mercedes at the end of the year, going to Alfa Romeo next season. And I think that just highlights the pressure of being in those top seats in Formula One, teammate to the Lewis Hamilton, the greatest driver of his generation, and take that pressure off Valtteri's shoulders. And all of a sudden, he's putting it on pole. He's won a race. He's been right up there again.
So yeah, pressure off his shoulders. He knows he's not driving for another contract, so he's just driving for himself at this point. And yeah, fantastic performance from Valtteri. Of course, George Russell announced for the following season. So we headed from Turkey all the way over to across the pond into the United States at the Circuit of the Americas. Now, that one, it all came to the boil, didn't it? Really, at the end of the race there. And good strategy call. Not enough laps to really make it stick. But what did you make of Qatar this year, Matt?
There were a lot of similarities to Bahrain. It was Hamilton who got the launch away and he was leading at the end of the first lap. But it was the undercut for Red Bull and making sure that they were always pitting before Lewis so they'd have the track position that won them that race. Because even at the end, with Hamilton charging up on fresher tyres like we saw Verstappen do in Bahrain, he couldn't get past. He couldn't quite get close enough to make the move. And it was Verstappen by about a second who won the US Grand Prix.
Yep, and they really played their cards right. And on them final laps, we had Mick Schumacher almost, throw it away potentially for Max, or maybe just got, the DRS for Max to save his bacon at the same time. Lewis, struggled once he got into that turbulent air. The tyres started to degrade, and yeah, it was all on a knife edge. But once again, great strategy. If it had been a couple more laps long, that could have been an easy win for Lewis, but it wasn't to be, and it was advantage Max Verstappen. At this point, all stars are aligning for Red Bull right now. They're pulling away in the Drivers' Championship. So we headed to Mexico, another strong track for the Red Bull package. Always has been, always will be, in my opinion. We're at high altitude where you can have a lot of downforce on the car, and it doesn't really affect it too much. And, of course, Sergio Perez, we've seen him win a race this year in that car, and he's coming home to the Mexican fans who thought they maybe saw the last of him a long time ago, Matt, and a special atmosphere at Mexico.
Yeah, a lot of Sergio Perez fans. We always see a nice amount of Sergio Perez fans, but especially this year when he's coming there in that package, like you say, that could win him a Grand Prix. Of course, at this stage in the season, he would have needed something to have happened to Verstappen to be able to win, because I think we all know that had Perez been leading but Verstappen in there behind, Red Bull don't care, do they? They will always make sure Verstappen gets the points because it's him who might be winning the title this year. But still a valiant effort from Checo, putting the pressure on Lewis, not quite able to get the move done. He thought about the lunge, didn't he? On that last lap, he had a look, but just not quite close enough to get it done. Had to settle for P3.
Yeah, playing the long game there, and just he wanted to be on that podium in that iconic baseball section of the stadium. There we saw Max Verstappen's car hoisted up to the podium, which we need to see more of that as well. It's iconic images, and I know the FIA and Parc Ferme don't like it taking the car on the car lift after the race, and of course we'll get into Parc Ferme in a minute. But yeah, it wasn't the most exhilarating race. Of course, the first opening laps in any race are quite exciting, Matt, but didn't exactly deliver a breathtaking race, would you say?
Nope. We did see, though, was another utter bottle job from Valtteri Bottas after taking pole position on the Saturday, which nobody expected. A Mercedes front row lockout at Mexico, that's unheard of in the modern era, but it happened. But on that run down to turn one, Bottas, he just was not aggressive enough with Verstappen. He needed to do what if you watch the 2019 Mexican Grand Prix, you watch the start. It was the two Ferraris on the front row with Hamilton in P3, and the Ferraris knew exactly what was going to happen at the run to turn one. They knew Hamilton's going to get in the slipstream and he's going to try and make the move. So what they did was this beautiful piece of teamwork. Both moved very aggressively across the left, and they just boxed Hamilton in, and that's it.
Yeah.
He was put onto the grass a little bit, which was a little bit cheeky from Seb that year. But that was Hamilton held nicely to P3 for turn one. Bottas and Hamilton against Verstappen, the door was left wide open for Max. He was on the racing line. He just steamed down the outside, and Mercedes threw away a front row lockout at the first corner.
Well, I think Valtteri, what more can he do? He forced Max onto the racing line, Matt. You said it yourself.
He did force him onto the racing line, but I don't know what else he wanted to do. Because at the end of the day, when you put Verstappen on the ideal line for the corner, what can you do?
What can you do? And then karma was served because he didn't charge hard enough. He got taken out and spun around by, who was it, Danny Rick? And then had to spend the rest of the race stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo. I'm sure there was a few choice words in the finish in that cockpit there because he was there all the way to the finish. Yeah.
Stuck behind Daniel Ricciardo, and that was another highlighting one of the issues we've seen with Bottas all through his career. He's just not aggressive enough. You were watching his onboards against Ricciardo. He's trying the exact same thing every lap, and it's clearly not working because he's been there now for about 40 laps. He's still stuck behind Ricciardo. And I was watching the race with my dad, and I was saying to him, he just needs to do something different. Just launch one to the outside. Do something different. Throw Daniel off. Because what you're doing now, Valtteri, is just sitting in P17 or whatever, getting no points.
Yeah, maybe build, use your power deployment in another section, use your overtake differently, or just, go for a lunge somewhere else, put him off into the braking zone. But, yeah, credit to Daniel Ricciardo at the end of the day. But Valtteri Bottas, we've seen it many a times where Lewis can just, string multiple overtakes. Another one would be Silverstone that comes to mind in the feature race, the main race, whatever you want to call it. Valtteri Bottas just got stuck behind cars. He can't get through, overtake, mount the charge, whereas Lewis, he's got that racing IQ where he can really make it count, study the car ahead of him, for a couple of laps and then pull the trigger when it's needed to. But, yeah, we left Mexico with Red Bull on a high. The pace difference was something, incredible. It looked like both Red Bulls should be 1 and 2 in that race, Matt. And coming into Brazil, another strong track for the Red Bull team. We expected utter domination from the charging bulls. And what did we get?
The polar opposite, didn't we? I think Brazil, I don't know if we really realised it going into it, but it was a really crucial race for the championship because had Verstappen won the Brazilian Grand Prix and Hamilton P2, the gap in the championship would have been up to 28 points. And that, with 3 races to go, 28 points for Lewis to close down 3 races, that's a very uphill task. I mean, Lewis is a fabulous driver, don't get me wrong, but that's a huge gap to bring down. And I think without something happening to Max in the final 3 races, that would have effectively been curtains on the championship. Job done for Max. He's just got to finish second in all the remaining races and he will be world champion. But Lewis, despite all the odds at the Brazilian Grand Prix, despite everything against him, he got it done in the end of the day. He closed down that championship lead, and the championship fight is absolutely still on. And I don't know if you know, but something that is pretty cool now. If Hamilton wins the next 2 races with Verstappen second, you disregard the fastest lap, they'll go into the final race tied on points. I mean, that would be absolute scene. Surely we'd all love to see that.
Yeah, that will be the gloves are off, and it'll just be may the best man win, and that's what you want going into the final race of the year. But just rewinding to Brazil, going into it, we thought it would be an easy pole position for that Red Bull package around there, but Mercedes have really pulled their finger out now. We've seen the DAS in previous years, different concepts on that car. And there was big talk around the Mercedes. I think it was from Austin onwards where they exited the corner. You could see the car really squat down on the rear in a straight line, managed to get the power. They had a huge straight line of advantage in Austin. We didn't really get to see that in Mexico because Mercedes have previously, going back 3 or 4 seasons, struggled with tyre warm-up on the rear of the package. So they're always ultra aggressive in that area. And that really come again to bite them in the rear end, literally in Mexico. Then coming into Brazil, though, I mean, everything came together. We saw again I don't want to say genius, but the expertise of Lewis Hamilton. In that FP1 session, he wasn't happy with the front end suspension, and he said, I need another solution. He come back into the pits, they changed it. He still wasn't happy. They changed something again, and then he got that car absolutely nailed on and absolutely pulled it out the bag going into the sprint race after that pole position, which was huge for the championship. He got called into the stewards and he had a failure, just to clarify, on the rear wing when it opens like a letterbox along the straights. On one side, there was a failure of one component, which meant it opened slightly too much. It was only on one section of the wing itself. And that component has been tested in previous events because we're in back-to-backs now. So they do use the same components, believe it or not. A lot of the cars have stone chips on them and a lot of damage you can see visibly in the paintwork. And we've seen Red Bull as well. They've had multiple failures of parts of their components and, you just change them out. But this one actually failed the test, meaning that he's absolutely disqualified from the standings and he would start P20. And you could just see literally the uphill task on that grid, couldn't you, Matt? You've got 19 cars ahead of you. Interlagos, turn 1. That's not where you want to be.
No, not at all. And I think the decision was interesting to disqualify Lewis. I think from the start of it, when it came out that, Lewis's rear wing's open too far, I was like, well, then he gets disqualified. It's straightforward. It's a simple decision. And the car's illegal. It's the same as if the front wing was flexing too much. Your car's not technically a Formula One car. You get kicked out. It was only much later on that we found out it was a damaged component that had caused only a small part of the rear wing to open too far. And normally in those conditions, the stewards are very lenient with you because they know that the only reason the car's technically not legal is because it's broken. It's the same if you break your front wing. An F1 car's not allowed to run without a front wing end plate. But if you lose it due to damage, the stewards are never going to kick you out the event because of it, are they? So I was a little bit surprised in the end by the decision to disqualify him, but it was a decision made nonetheless. We came to the sprint, Lewis looking up at all those 19 cars, and he just drove past 14 of them. Nice and simple.
I mean, he made it look simple, didn't he? He had like 3 or 4 cars before the exit of turn 2, and he was a man possessed. We saw him go around the outside, up the hill in that end of the first sector, around, I think, Sonoda. And, that's a dangerous position to put yourself in. But Lewis had his back against the wall. Lewis was driving angry. And when you see Lewis driving with something to fight for, that's when you see the best of him. And my God, on Saturday, that was one hell of a performance, overtaking as many cars. Of course, a lot of people say it's easy in the fastest car on the grid, but we've seen with Valtteri Bottas, he doesn't make it look easy. We saw it in this, in the sprint race as well. He struggled for certain portions. He did get the victory in the end, and he got the reef. Did he win the sprint race? Was it him? Yeah, so good performance. But then, of course, Lewis took another internal combustion engine, the ICE, on his car, which is the pistons and everything that goes bang in the engine. And we've seen about a 10% drop-off, Toto was saying, in the power unit's performance from beginning to the end of the life cycle. They only get 3 allocated for the season. Lewis has now had 2 late on in this season. He has 2 left in the pool, so expect him to really be firing on all cylinders, pardon the pun, going into the final couple of rounds now and have that performance advantage in the high-speed Losail and Jeddah circuit in particular. But yeah, another 5-place grid penalty because of that, Matt. So got up to P5, but now again relegated back to P10. Yeah, his work cut out.
Yeah, but didn't phase Mr. Lewis, did it? I think he was lap 5, and he was already up to P3. He had a good start, made up some places, and then the few midfield cars he had left ahead of him, I seem to remember both McLarens got out his way. Nando got a punch lap 1. Ricardo, I think, just got a bad start or something. He cleared the Ferraris, no match in a straight line for the Mercedes at all. Bottas let him go, and that was him already into P3 and behind the Red Bulls. He got past Checo with these as well, didn't he? Well, he didn't the first time.
No, Checo got him back.
And Checo did. I saw the move into turn 1. I watched Lewis go by, and I was like, Checo, that's the kind of crap I expect from Bottas, not from you. You just let him go. That is poor from you. But Checo knew what he was doing. He came back at him down into Ciudad del Lago, and he put himself back up into P2. But it wasn't going to last long, was it? The straight line speed of the Mercedes was insane. I clocked it on my phone. Hamilton, when he did put the move on Checo, 28 kph faster. I know he's got DRS in that situation, but that's a huge amount to be quicker than.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. When he was comparing it, I think in the speed tracks when Max and Lewis didn't have DRS, I think it was about 3 kph quicker. He could have been harvesting, like maybe dialing it back a bit at that point, but I think it's just more getting out the corner so much quicker as well, getting on the power, getting it translated down into the tarmac right now. The Mercedes is really doing well. And I didn't think Sunday they would have that much performance advantage because we saw a massive swing in the track temps from Saturday to the Sunday. But it still performed beautifully. And remember, Lewis is being ultra aggressive. He's stuck behind cars for a lot of the race as well, cooking up their tyres, really sliding around a lot, trying to get them overtakes done. But yeah, he just made it look like easy, like you say. Yeah, and then we got a massive shout out to Valtteri. I mean, the ultimate wingman once again. Like, how much time did he lose? 5 seconds by letting Lewis pass? It was a huge chunk, wasn't it, Matt?
Yeah, it was massive. I was surprised when I watched him. I was like, whoa, Valtteri had to slow down for that. But that was Mercedes. They didn't want Lewis to lose anything with the dirty air, did they? They wanted to make sure that it was Lewis charging forward to get the points he needs for his championship hopes.
Yeah, no, he wanted to tow Valtteri along with him at that point as well and try to keep him in the DRS. We heard it from, was it Checo Perez saying, can Max give me the DRS as well? We had that early safety car, everyone bunched up, and Sergio was quite concerned at that point and wanted to try and maintain the position. But it wasn't to be. When Max was caught by Lewis, though, he put up a bit of a fight, Matt?
Yeah, and I feel like this is where we lock horns, Rich. Yeah, it took him a while, didn't it? He did take a while to get to a position where he could make a move. He caught Max, and then he got stuck there for a while. And then it was after the second round of stops where Lewis really put the foot down and he went for it. And there was a few times where you could just see Lewis, he was just testing the water a bit, wasn't he? He was just looked to the inside. Verstappen maybe defending fresh air a little bit. I think I said that a few times in the race. He was kind of coming over to cover off Lewis. And I was like, yeah, Lewis isn't going for it though. And unfortunately, that would cost him coming out of turn 2, which would give Lewis the run out of turn 3 and down to turn 4. First time Lewis got the move done on that run down to turn 4, he just used the DRS, pulled past. And you would think that's job done. He's ahead fully going into the corner. And then you just have to remember, it's Max Verstappen behind him, isn't it? Verstappen's not just going to let Lewis go. And indeed he did not. And he launched one on the brakes, turned into the corner. Yeah, a little bit not. ran both of them off the track, and that's sparked a little bit of controversy, shall we say.
Yeah, I feel me and Matt had a bit of a heated exchange in the Discord server when we first reviewed that. Of course, we didn't have the onboard footage. Of course, Max is always going to have to turn into the corner. It's about how much he tries to commit to the inside apex, like a lot of people criticised Lewis for in lap 1 of the Silverstone race as well when they made contact. And it was pretty much roles reversed here, but I feel where Lewis maybe understeered a bit more going into that corner, but with the tighter angle being squeezed by Max in the centre of the road. I think this one, Lewis had the racing line going into it. He was on the outside. He had his car ahead. I feel Max just broke way too late going into it. Maybe let off the brakes a bit too early and maybe got on the power a bit too early as well, trying to take the corner. Was never going to make the actual within the white lines and forced to take Lewis with him. Now, looking at the onboard footage, you can see comparisons from the lap before to the lap of the incident. You can see how much steering angle is going into it. And considering he's taken a tighter line into it, he needs to brake a bit earlier and steer a bit harder, you'd imagine, to make the corner, which we failed to see. So, you know, I feel a bit let down by Max personally. You know, when he's coming under attack, you know, in a race winning situation, he can, I've used the word a spoilt brat at times. He doesn't want anyone to play with. You can tell he's a bit of an only child, you know what I mean, in that respect. And I'm not a fan of his driving. I mean, we've seen it at Imola, given the benefit of the doubt. We've seen contact in Monza, which could have been avoided. And I also feel, to a certain extent, he could have avoided that one at Silverstone. That will come in time as well. He'll need to raise his IQ and know what battles to pick and when, and not to be, you know, do or die. You know, either we're going to commit to this corner or we're both going to go into the barrier. But I know your opinion is slightly different on it, Matt.
Yeah. I like Max, and I like his aggression. I like his lack of care. He doesn't care who you are. Or wait on, if you want to pass Max, you have the decision normally, either concede the place or have a crash. That's your decision to make. And I don't think he's like that with everyone. I think there's definitely, he does it when he needs to be. And more often than not, when he's fighting Lewis, he knows if he wants to win the battle, he's really got to get his elbows out. And most of the season, I would say it has been hard racing, but fair. I would think, like what he did in Silverstone, it was very aggressive, the way he squeezed Lewis right to the wall, but perfectly legal. I think coming through the corner again, he did turn right across Lewis. But again, he did leave the car's width on the inside, perfectly legal. I think Imola as well, it's a bit, it's lap 1, it's raining, Lewis was brave going to the outside there. Brazil, I think there's a line, and I think Max may have just gone over it there. And I don't
he definitely did.
White line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been fine to sort of turf Lewis out of the track. I think we've seen that many times, drivers do that. Yeah. Had Max made the corner, I think the problem starts when Max also goes off the road. That's when that's not okay now, because now we're just ignoring the circuit and we're just doing our own thing. And I think that's where Max needed to make a lot more effort to keep it on the road. And I think now that footage is out, that Max didn't make as much effort as perhaps he should have done to make the corner. Mercedes have appealed it. They have protested or gone for the right to review, or whatever it's called. I think there's definitely a chance the stewards may have a change of opinion.
Well, their decision will be final, and you can only have a right to review when there is new and substantial evidence, and the fact that you didn't have access to that on board, because you do have a driver. You can follow a driver on the F1 TV. It was looking somewhere else at that point. So they had to download it from the car. That's why we've seen it 3 days later. It's not a conspiracy like a lot of people have been saying, etc. But also the other part of the incident, which made it a bit more difficult for the stewards, if Max had just squeezed Lewis off the circuit and held on to the position, I think it would have been a lot more of a cut dry penalty. But the fact that both of them left the circuit and no one gained an advantage was something, which doesn't always happen. So they've not had too much to look back on there, for instance. But if we look at the Silverstone incident, the stewards always say it's not the consequence, it's the actual action which will determine the penalty. So if we look at that there, Lewis made contact by squeezing and forcing a Max circuit there and held on to a position. That's why he got a 10-second penalty. I don't expect it to be as severe of that. I expect it to be some kind of warning or a minimal penalty potentially for Max. Could have potentially been a black and white flag at that point even. We've seen that in the past as well. I think that would have been fair enough. A stern warning that you can't do that the next time. So, Lewis can try that move again. And if he does it again, it's a slam dunk penalty. But, we've seen it with Schumacher in the past, Okay, I'm leading the championship. I don't need to score the points. You have to. And I know you like that, Matt, don't you? I can see you grinning ear to ear because it's a cutthroat driver. And, that's a winning mentality as well at the end of the day. But, at the GDC, we like to see a bit more gentlemanly behaviour. But he was fighting a losing cause at that point. And he had to try something desperate. And it took Lewis another 10 laps or so, was it, to really get the momentum back and get close enough, because he dropped back out of the DRS, had to gain that charge, got into it, dropped back out of it again. And then finally, going down into turn one. Tell us what happened, Matt.
Into turn one. He did it again, didn't he? He looked to the inside. He didn't send one. He just had that little look, and that threw Verstappen offline. Because Max goes, Max isn't watching the onboard of Lewis like we are. He's just having a quick glance in his mirrors before having to focus on making the corner. All he's done is seen Lewis's car there on his left, and has gone instantly. He might be sending it here, covers the inside. And that would be fine, but the way turns 1, 2, and 3 are all laid out at Brazil, you go offline at turn 1, you're offline at turn 2. And if you're offline at turn 2, you can't get the run off the corner through turn 3. And ultimately, that's what cost Verstappen. It allowed Lewis to be right up on the back of the gearbox of Verstappen, going onto the back straight. And with the help of DRS, Lewis breezed on by into the lead. Job's a good one.
Yeah, and Max was shown the black and white flag at that point as well, because he could see Lewis coming. He went left, he went right, he went left, and he tried to try and break the toe, which was to no avail, of course. And Lewis was charging hard, and just compromising turn one by taking that tighter defensive line. Lewis just lined him up, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He compromised one himself, Lewis, but he could line up 2 and 3 and get a charge right down there. Once he was past, it was pretty much done, wasn't it? He just started to pull away, control the pace, and let the tyres cool down a bit more. And it was jobs a good one.
Yeah, nice, easy job there in the end for Lewis once he'd got the move done. Controlled it to the end. And we heard, was it Toto who got on the radio to Valtteri saying, come on, we can get him? It was about 9 seconds behind with 10 laps to go. I was like, yeah, you think Valtteri Bottas is going to close that gap and then pass Max Verstappen? Not going to happen. But he did close the gap, Valtteri, down to, I think it's about 3 seconds by the time they crossed the finish line, which does set up this, that if Verstappen were to get now penalised for the events of turn 4, Bottas is there to take place and take the points away from Max, which is what you need from a teammate.
Yeah, what's that? A further 3 points would it be? Swing in the championship?
Yeah,
so that could be crucial. Like we say, if Lewis wins the next few rounds, Max finishes second, that could potentially be a 3-point advantage going into the final race. Of course, dependent on the fastest lap. Talking of the fastest lap, it's important that they've got a quick driver in that Red Bull as well, because Checo had no one behind him. He wasn't catching Valtteri. They pulled him in. Clever. They done it on the second to last lap, so they got one more flying lap round, and Bottas couldn't come and do the same thing and cover off that fastest lap attempt. So good call there. I think Brundle even called it on the commentary, though. He should be an F1 strategist as well at times, because he knows what he's talking about. But managed to pull off the fastest lap. I think someone did try and slow him down towards the end there. It was close enough, but Yeah, it wasn't to be, and big advantage to Mercedes on the pace this weekend, Matt. It's a real chalk and cheese, and that's the story of the season, isn't it? Like at one point you think the Mercedes is on top, next thing the Red Bull is miles ahead. You don't know what to call. What do you expect going into Losail? Of course, we never raced around there. We've got a night race. I think it might be a good setup for the Mercedes. We know it likes cooler conditions. We are in the desert, but it is at night. So hopefully track temps not as peaky, shall we say, but do you know anything about the circuit we're coming to? Because I've got no idea.
I've driven it like 3 times on the MotoGP game. It's very much a MotoGP circuit. Yeah, I think racing might be a bit difficult on the whole. I think there's a few overtaking opportunities. There is, however, a nice lengthy pit straight, which the super straight line speed of the Mercedes will definitely do well on. Plenty of high speed sections on the circuit. So on paper, I will say it should be Mercedes, but we thought France was going to be Mercedes and Red Bull rocked up and did it all. We thought Brazil was going to be Red Bull and it was Mercedes who came out on top. You can't predict it.
So it'll be an easy Ferrari win then, that's what you're saying.
Ferrari 1-2 confirmed.
So yeah, let's talk about that as well, because Ferrari had some recent updates to their power unit as well, and they've really come to the fore now, where it was a battle between McLaren earlier on in the season, and they was really at the forefront winning races. Now for McLaren are struggling to stay with Ferrari at this point, both of them as well.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think that is definitely down to Ferrari just developing their current car. They put a lot into the engine side of things, I should imagine, because I don't know why you'd bother developing the current chassis, seeing as it's going to be used for another few months and then they're getting rid of them. So I should imagine it's all coming from Ferrari's power unit, which is because that's obviously they can use that next year again. And it's worked beautifully for them because they are, in recent races, one step ahead of McLaren. And I think now in the constructors, they're about 30 points clear of the Papaya outfit. So it should be, touch wood, a Ferrari P3.
It should be, and we'll see about that, because you don't know where to look with this season. It's just up and down all over the place. But yeah, of course, all teams are limited to what they can do with their power units. They can't bring a whole new concept at any point. They have to use a token system to upgrade their cars, etc. And a lot of emphasis and a lot of their R&D. Of course, we've got a cost cap in place as well. We've seen the likes of Aston Martin really building their resources, throwing a lot in the future projects and building up the infrastructure within the team now, before that big budget cap is really going to start to confine them. And also the R&D time as well. If you finish the top of the championship, you're going to have the smallest amount of time to develop your car, whereas if you're at the bottom, you've got more time, more resources available to throw at it. So hopefully that reduces the sort of delta on circuit between all of the teams as well. And it's good to see for the sport, Matt, that things are being a bit more fair compared to the Bernie sort of era.
Yeah, I think that's great for the future of Formula One. Ferrari can't just throw money at a solution to be the quickest team anymore, which is ideal. Of course, with the budget cap, I don't think all teams are operating to the budget cap. Of course, I think there are still some which are under, but it's still it closes up that gap, and it should benefit those smaller teams like Haas, like I was going to say like Aston Martin, but they're not a small team anymore. They've got all the funding they're going to need. But yeah, it should be good for the future of Formula One.
Yeah, it should be, and it looks rosy, the future. They've tried to make the cars, of course, a bit more compliant when it comes to following, on the racetrack, and hopefully aid overtaking. We still got DRS next year, Matt. I can never remember. We still have DRS
for next season. I think they're going to monitor it, and I think there's definitely, it's not a permanent feature. They do want to get rid of it. They just don't want to get rid of it right from the start, and then we rock up and the cars aren't as good as they're cracked up to be, and we just end up with no racing. So I think it's just a safety net for now.
Yeah, it's a system that's worked in this era of cars, but moving into the more ground effect era, shall we say, hopefully that won't be too much of an issue, and cars will be able to follow a bit more closely throughout the laps. But on to other topics. Of course, Valtteri has had a very disappointing year, and the big disappointment will be that he will be leaving Mercedes, a team where, he's had the opportunity to shine. He's had to play a wingman at parts. Lewis has called him the best teammate ever, and what more could you want? I don't think Lewis wanted a certain George Russell next to him next year. Do you think that?
No, absolutely not. He was very happy with Valtteri because I think it's the only teammate, other than Heikki Kovalainen, the only teammate Lewis has had who's just not really been able to challenge him ever. So obviously he debuted and he had Alonso, who's always going to be able to challenge Hamilton because Fernando is just one of the greatest of his time. He then had, after Kovalainen, he had Jenson Button, who'd just come off the back of winning the World Championship. He was always going to put the pressure on Lewis. He then had, that was then when he made his switch to Mercedes, and he had Rosberg, who we all know was right there with Lewis and actually beat Lewis to a World Championship, as much as you don't like that, but he did. And then he's just had Bottas ever since, who's never posed a threat. He's always been happy to play the team game. Alonso, Button, and Rosberg, you weren't seeing that from them, were you?
No, initially Rosberg was it was two alpha males in that team, and they was both going at it. And of course, Rosberg was there with Schumacher, founding the team, taking it over from Braun, developing that side of it. So Lewis coming in, he wasn't too happy. He wanted to be the big dog and to lead the team going forward. But we saw a few explosions in terms of that friendship, and it was always a friendship growing up there. They had huge respect for each other. But got to have huge respect for Rosberg for actually, taking it to Lewis on, qualifying. He raised his game in qualifying massively, Rosberg as well. Lewis has been one of the best qualifiers ever, you'd have to say. But really pulled out the bag. But you got to worry because we've seen it with Vettel, with bringing Charles Leclerc in, really unsettled the boat, and the team could start to fall apart, and there could be big rifts. Valtteri is very good at sharing data. They both sit there in the engineer's briefing and work together on the car. I'm sure George would do that season 1. Season 2 might be a bit different, man. That's what I'm going to say.
I think George has to play it smart. I think he knows in that first year, as he adapts to Mercedes, he needs Lewis to be on his side. He needs the help from Lewis, because Lewis has been in that team for 8 seasons now, 9 seasons. He's been there a long time. He knows that team like the back of his hand, and how to set the car up and everything in that team. It's all centered around Lewis. So for that first year, he definitely wants Lewis on his side. After that, once he's settled in, he then needs to really start to take the challenge to Lewis in order to not become Valtteri Bottas. Because of course, Valtteri, we do slate him a lot. He was a very quick young driver, but he came to Mercedes and he just wasn't quite there.
Yeah, he was kind of the Eddie Irvine, for what Michael Schumacher was. But it is what it is. But and on the same thing as well. Let's look at it like Lewis is not going to be around forever. How many more seasons will he compete in? 2, maybe 3 maximum at a push. I would say it depends how much he likes these cars, because his driving style might not suit it whatsoever. We might see a new leash of life for Sebastian Vettel. You never know, because these cars will suit certain drivers more than others in terms of their drivability, etc. So let's watch out for that, because George, he might do well to be the protege, the apprentice to Lewis, take as much knowledge from him, be a sponge in there, because Lewis, like you say, he's developed that car, he's built it, it's all his feedback, it's his philosophy, and George will have to take that baton on and make it more his team going forward as well, and do that as harmoniously as possible without there being some big fallout. So let's watch out for that. Going through for the next seasons as well, I reckon Aston Martin will be right up there, Matt. I think they'll be at the front of the pecking order. Expect a return for Ferrari, McLaren. And I think we could have 4 or 5 teams scrapping for it. Who's your dark horse, shall we say?
Wow. Okay. Yeah, like you say, Aston Martin are definitely that'd be your sort of go-to, wouldn't it? They've got these new owners in Aston Martin, and they definitely, they're building a new facility. They've definitely got the intentions of taking that team to the top of motorsport, and this is their big opportunity, if you like. They've got all new cars. It's a reset for everyone. This is their chance. McLaren have been building for the last few years. Ever since 2017, they have been on the up, and I highly doubt they're going to stop doing that going into the new era. Ferrari, providing that they're not spending too much focus on this year's car and they have put the time into next year's, they're definitely going to be well in that hunt, because it's Ferrari. They're not just going to let themselves fall away into the midfield again. They will be fighting to get back up to the front. Alpine, how do we feel about Alpine? I know Alonso leading that team now, or trying to. Ocon's not a million miles away, but Alonso trying to sort of lead that team into the future. Do we think they could get up there?
I think there will be fringe contenders because, when you've only got one team with that power unit and that concept, you don't have a junior team. That's critical data as well for the likes of, the Mercedes. And even the Ferrari, even though they've only got the Alfa Romeo and the Haas, which ain't too competitive, but I think it's a real disadvantage for them only having the power unit in two cars in terms of data. The Honda is right up there now. Of course, Honda will pull the plug. There will be a sort of transition phase for them as well, where some of the personnel will come across to the Red Bull whilst they run that engine. So we'll see about that. But I don't expect big things from the Alpine. I expect AlphaTauri to maybe take a bit more of a lead in that battle on the fringe parts there, because I think Red Bull will work a bit more closely in this modern era as well to try and understand their philosophies a bit better, to the extent they can anyway, because there's obviously some restrictions in terms of how much you can share, as we've learned from Aston Martin and Mercedes.
Yeah, pink Mercedes. Yeah, for sure. And AlphaTauri, of course, we know AlphaTauri, they'll be limited, I think, to the midfield, because that's how Red Bull works, isn't it? They're a junior team. You don't want your junior team to be fighting at the front, because you're just going to put all the pressure on your junior drivers. AlphaTauri are not midfield teams necessarily by that's all they're capable of. They're there also because of choice. It's perfect for their drivers to be in the fight, to get used to Formula One, but not be under the spotlight of you need to be delivering podiums every race. It's just, you can have an off race and nobody's going to notice.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's going to be a big transition for some of the other teams. Just looking through there, of course, with the Alfa Romeo team, it's all change over there. Some established figures in that team. We say goodbye, unfortunately, to the Iceman, the man of very few words. Kimi Räikkönen will be leaving. Don't expect a retirement speech from him. That's definitely not going to happen. Antonio Giovinazzi as well has also been dropped. And that all comes down to a pound note, Matt. Because Guan Yu Zhou will be coming in with big money and big sponsorship as well, you'd expect from China.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of their decision to take Guan Yu Zhou. I think he's don't get me wrong, he's a good driver, and we've seen that in Formula 2, but he hasn't done anything to me that screams future champion. I think in his 3 seasons of Formula 2, he's amassed 4 race victories. It's not overly impressive, if you know what I mean. I mean, don't get me wrong. Great drivers don't win much in Formula 2. I mean, Lando Norris, he took 1 victory in his season of Formula 2. Mick Schumacher, the reigning champion, the 2019 champion, he won 3 races in his 2 seasons. So you don't have to be winning all the time. But I just think for Joe, he's been there 3 years. He's never quite got there with a championship. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how he fares against Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, it's a shame as well because, money talks at the end of the day. But if you can big sponsors in, of course, Haas are only on the grid because they managed to secure the services of Mick Schumacher, who brings a lot of funding from his dad's old sponsorships as well from Germany. And then, of course, Nikita Mazepin, who has, he's calmed down on the Spinalas recently, which is a shame because there was a bit of a theme going on. What lap he would spin and how and when and stuff like that. But, he saved the team. His father has anyway, Matt.
Yeah. Mazepin came into Formula 1 and again, he's one who's a bit like I was saying about Joe. He wasn't a bad driver in Formula 2. You know, I think he was fifth in the championship last year or something, which isn't great, but he's not terrible. He picked up some race wins. He's just, I know that Haas is hard to drive, but in qualifying, he's been about a second off the pace of his teammate, I think, on average. And in the race, we saw, especially early on in the season, like you say, it was Spinala, Spinala, Spinala. You know, you see the yellow flag graphic come up in the top of the screen, and you'd be like, "Oh, Mazepin, what have you done this time?" But he's definitely calmed down, and he's improved to an extent. How long his future lasts in Formula One at the moment, it's until Haas can afford not to have him.
Yeah, and Gene Haas, we've seen it in the documentary. If you've not watched it as well, you need to go and watch it. It's beautiful to get under the skin. A lot of it is over dramatized, of course, but Gene Haas saying, unless you can find the money, you know, I'm not willing to keep putting money into this because it's quite embarrassing for them. There was rumours, of course, Matt, of another American team coming in with the Andretti brand. Didn't come to fruition. I think that was why there was some delay with the driver announcement at the Alfa Romeo team as well. They was looking to come in partnership there with the Sauber group, but didn't happen. So that's why there's maybe holding that seat for an American driver, but it wasn't to be. Sorry. Nice.
Yeah, I think for sure, and I think also perhaps the delay in that seat was, I think they were perhaps waiting for Antonio to get his future sorted, because of course on the same day we had the Guan Yu Zhou announcement, we also had the announcement of Giovinazzi going to Formula E next season, which is good for him to have somewhere to go. We've so often seen drivers lose their place in Formula One and then not find somewhere to go. All the other seats in motorsport are already taken, and it's kind of what happened with Hülkenberg, wasn't it? He got turfed out of this Formula One seat, and he's now he's an Aston Martin reserve driver, but I don't know what he does there until someone gets COVID.
Well, it worked out all right last season, didn't it? Yeah. He got a couple of drives there, but he's put himself in limbo. We've seen Roman Grosjean leave the Formula One paddock and go over to the States, and he's been doing very well at Laguna Seca. He's been getting his elbows out, getting some good performances in. We saw Alex Albon as well go to DTM and race his Toro Rosso Ferrari around there and pull out an impressive victory recently as well. And he'll be back to the grid as well, managed to bounce back. So some drivers get a second bite at the cherry. I don't feel Giovinazzi will. I think it was his second spell in the sport, and I think it'll be his last now as well. But looking at Williams, of course, they've got Latifi, who brings money. Once again, he brings money to the team. And we thought it might get blocked. Alex Albon, being a Red Bull driver, go into a Mercedes power team. They like to put one of their junior prospects in there so they get a cut price discount on their power units. That's how it works. It's all side deals. It's a bit Del Boy wheeler dealer in the paddock when it comes to these kind of things. But Alex Albon has been given a huge opportunity. And do you think Williams will continue this upward trend, Matt?
Yeah, they're another one that will be interesting to see how they go into the new regulations. I think they've been on the up since 2019, haven't they? They have been edging up the grid. They've gone from where Haas are now, being 19th and 20th every week, to, on the odd occasion, actually being there in the hunt for the points, which is good for them. They are losing George Russell, and that's big for them, because George has been, I don't want to say carrying that team, because Latifi has scored points. But if I were to ask you who's the number one at Williams right now, you're going to say George Russell, no question, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think they are losing that talent, but they are gaining Alex Albon, and it'll be interesting to see how he fares in that seat.
Yeah, and of course Jensen came in recently as well, didn't he? As a senior, was not an engineer, but kind of like to coach the drivers, develop the team as well. So he'll play a part in that, and it'll be good to Alex and for Nicholas to have alongside a World Championship winner as well. Going into the future, though, I don't expect Mercedes to be here in 5 years' time, personally, Matt. We've seen rumours of, not rumours, Ineos have taken more of a controlling stake within the team. It could be Ineos Racing in years to come. could be rebranded to AMG very soon, the actual team itself. But I think they'll pull the plug altogether on the sport within the next 5 years, and that's why I expect Aston Martin to really come to the fore and be like powered and be the front-running Mercedes or AMG-powered car on the grid. Do you expect any other changes on the grid, team-wise? Any big things you're hearing?
Now the big one is Haas, isn't it? It's going to be a big year for Haas next year, because I think if they don't get their shit together, Gene Haas, I think, will pull the plug, and we may be down, unless they can find someone who's willing to take on that team. We could be down to 9 teams in Formula One.
Yeah, but there's been big developments, hasn't there, on the power unit front as well, to make it a bit more attractive. So we're hearing rumours of Audi and the Porsche brands potentially coming in, because they're taking away this very costly and it's not really used in other aspects of automotive, and that's not the right word, but the MGUH aspect of the power unit is a very costly part to develop, and it's not used in everyday applications. Whereas the MGUK is the kinetic energy recovery systems. You're seeing that used on a lot more road cars, etc. So it's a bit more attractive for a manufacturer to come in. It could be one of them German brands that I mentioned. I would love to see Audi there. Who would you like to see in the sport, Matt? Would you like to see a Toyota return? Who would it be for you?
A lot of teams I'd like to see. You've got Porsche and Audi who've had great success in other forms of motorsport, particularly on sort of the prototype cars in Le Mans and that sort of thing. Who else have you got? You've got sort of, always growing up, I always liked the idea of a Lamborghini Formula One team. I don't know why. It was just always one that kept coming up. I don't think they've got any intentions of coming over anytime soon, but it could be interesting. I think Jaguar. I don't know. I love the look of those cars back in the early 2000s. I would like to see one of those cars again. Who else could we have? Like you say, Toyota coming back maybe. Ford. What do Ford do in motorsport these days? They do GT, don't they? Like GTE.
Well, I think they backed out of that quite recently. To my knowledge, anyway, I don't really see them on the grid too much in terms of Le Mans. They sort of come and go when they need to sort of have a marketing campaign. But, they don't do much. Of course, they was big in rally recently, gone away from that. So maybe a comeback for them. But is that their philosophy? Is that what they want? Of course, a lot of these manufacturers looking towards electric now. That's why we're seeing a lot more entries into Formula E as opposed to Formula One as a carbon neutral alternative. But we've seen a new slogan from the F1. They're the most efficient engines in the world now. When they first went into this turbo hybrid era, they was looking at recovering, which was a mind-blowing figure back then, a 15% of the energy loss. So that means 15% of the stuff you blow up in the engine to make it go forwards, to try and recover that back through either the turbo heat, the brakes. Of course, when you transmit the energy from going forwards to braking, it goes into heat. Recycle that back into electrical power. F1 is now doing over 50%. And their early estimations top end were 15. So it just goes to show the sky's the limit, and you don't know how far this can go. So let's hope we can hold on to them noisy engines. They're not as noisy as they once were, Matt, but it'd be a shame to lose them altogether. Do you think it will ever go fully electric?
There is, long term, I think it is almost inevitable that at some stage we will lose the combustion engine. I think that's, if you say it's never going to happen, I think you're fighting change at that point. However, I don't see it happening anytime soon. I mean, it can't happen anytime soon. I don't remember what the year for it is, but Formula E have the contract or something for electric motorsport for the FIA. So Formula One cannot, I think it's, what is it, like it's 2040 or something ridiculous, I think, that they can't go electric until. Formula E will be the only fully electric open wheel series, I think. But yeah, after that, depending on where the automotive industry is, are we all by that time driving electric cars? Because if we are,
God, I hope not.
Why? Yeah, I hope.
God,
if we all are, why would Formula One teams spend millions of pounds developing a combustion engine that isn't going to be used in the real world, if you know what I mean.
Well, if it gets to that stage, then just bring back a V8. Just make it as uneconomical as possible, as loud as possible, and just make it great for the fans. Because you want that nostalgia, you want the smell, the noise, all of that attack on your senses. That's what you want to see. The only other alternatives is they go really hard on the biofuel aspect and try and make it, better on that front and the emissions. Alternative would be hydrogen as well, which you could potentially see has always been earmarked, but never really come to the plan. But the future's good at the minute, the short-term future of F1. Long-term, who knows what will be in store. But we're going to have a titanic battle in the final races of Losail. Jeddah, I think they're still working on it now. They've still got a lot of work to do to get that race off the ground. And actually, until we get the lights on there, it's still a bit up in the air for me. And then we head into Abu Dhabi and your favourite 90-degree corner circuit, Matt.
90-degree corner after 90-degree corner. That's what we love to see. It's creative track design like that it warms my heart. We've had some changes for this year. They've got rid of that stupid little chicane at the end of the first sector. Thank the Lord for that, because that chicane is horrible. It only exists because they decided, you know what? Let's build Ferrari World right next to the circuit. Thank God they can get rid of it. We can hopefully see a bit better racing. They've got rid of the chicane at the other end of the circuit, haven't they? At the end of the second of the two back straights. That was an overtaking opportunity. We'll see how the new corner fares. And then they've just reprofiled 90-degree central. So they're a bit more on camber at least, so the cars should be able to follow a little bit better through them. But we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I think taking away the first proper chicane, I think that was a good call. The second one, I think that's a bit of a loss actually, like you say, because it's a very heavy braking zone. It won't be so much now. So will you see so much of a dive bomb? We've always enjoyed it on the F1 simulations, etc. But we'll see how it fares at the end of the season. But it's going to be anyone's call in these final 3 rounds. It could come down to driver, team calls. It could come down to reliability and just being in the right place at the right time. The teammates, they will have their say as well. If Sergio Perez, Valtteri Bottas can actually nick some points off the rest of them. But we've got to expect them to come together on track again soon, Matt. Do you think there's going to be many more explosions in these final rounds?
I think that we've seen it happen in the past, haven't we? That the great champions will do anything it takes to win. We've seen Alain Prost drive into Senna to win a championship. We've seen Senna drive into Prost to win a world championship. We've seen Michael Schumacher drive into everyone he can find to win a world championship. And I don't think, when it comes down to it, Verstappen especially, and I think Hamilton as well, I don't think they'll be any different.
Yeah, we've seen it. Michael Schumacher, it worked out very well the first time on Damon. The second time with Villeneuve, that didn't work, did it? I think was the commentary line. And of course, he was famously, excluded from the championship? I think he was talking about it. Yeah, so you've got to be careful how you do it. And maybe you need to call in a favour and say, Sergio, I need this one off you, mate. Okay, I'll give you one next year. But I wouldn't be surprised, Matt. I wouldn't be surprised at all. But thanks for coming on today, mate. Let's do this a bit more often. It's been fun talking to you. A lot to catch up on. And sorry for boring you all to death. And you as well, Matt. Thank you for your time. Anything else you want to talk about before we get going?
How long have we been going for now? I think we've gone on for long enough. We'll save something for next time, Rich. Okay. It's been a pleasure talking to you, as always. And we should do this more often. It's been great.
Yeah, if you want to get involved, let us know. We'll try to get you on the next one, get a different opinion. If you're a Max Verstappen fanboy or any of the others, get in touch because we need something to argue about. But thanks for joining us, Matt. See you sometime soon. Take care. Adios. Cheers.